Welcome to the Wildlife Wire. I'm Mark Searles,
And I'm Samantha Miller.
and this is your source for wildlife news and the people that make it.
Hello and welcome to the Wildlife Wire. Today we are joined by one of our personal heroes, the first gentleman of Colorado, Marlon Reis. Marlon is a champion for the natural world, promoting awareness of the interconnections between people, animals, and the environment. Marlon has brilliantly leveraged his role in Colorado to advocate for animals of all kinds. From puppies in pet stores to wolves in the wild, Marlon has consistently pushed for humane treatment of all species. In his spare time, Marlon enjoys watching nature documentaries, visiting animal sanctuaries, and walking his own domestic canid, his beloved pup, Gia. We are thrilled to have you with us today. Welcome, first gentleman, Marlon Reis.
Thank you so much, Sam. I wish that I could emulate your wonderful voice over. You're so professional and polished. I will no doubt drift off or go on a tangent at some point, but it's a delight to be with you guys today, and I have so enjoyed working with you over the years on all of the issues that we care about and that we have in common. And I would bring Gia here, but she's enjoying a nap on the other side of this computer screen.
How lucky for her. I wish I was enjoying a nap, at some point today too. Well, we are just so happy to have you here, and I have to say it's been such an honor to work alongside you, and it's been really rare in my experience in working in different states across the country to see someone champion animals, both domestic and wild, at the level that you do, and to really dedicate your life's work towards this kind of advocacy. I mean, I've been constantly impressed by what you can accomplish in 24 hours. I don't know if you have the same number of hours in a day as I do, but it's just been amazing. And so I'm wondering, where did all of this animal advocacy start? Where did this passion come from?
It's a great question, Sam. So, and I've gotten this question actually a number of times over the last 7 years, which has forced me to sort of compose the answer in a more coherent way in my head so that I could at least make it sound as if it traced back to a particular moment. The reality, though, is I grew up in a house with parents who also loved animals. They had a particular passion for cats, and we had five domestic cats. But they had posters up on the walls of big cats and wild cats, and uh, so that certainly played a role. Having parents who were fans of animals. I also seemed to grow up at a time, and maybe Mark also you remember this since we share a birth year. But towards the end of the 1980s, there were a series of films that came out that really sort of shaped my thinking about animals. One of them was a movie we all know probably called Milo and Otis.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
It's
right?
a great.
It's a great movie, a friendship between a dog and a cat. And I think I remember Dudley Moore at least voiced one of them. I think he voiced Otis, maybe. Anyway, it was fascinating to me at the time. I remember thinking all I had ever heard were that cats and dogs do not get along. And here we had a movie about them going on an adventure together and what it was like out in nature and to sort of escape the domestic sphere. And then a few years later, there was a film I loved. This was probably 1989 or 1990 called The Bear. And it was a silent film, I think, out of Canada. And it was about an orphaned uh, Kodiak grizzly. And it was the story of how he had lost his mother and then been adopted by another Kodiak grizzly mother and a group of hunters who were pursuing her. And at the end there was this scene. It was remarkable. They The hunters thought they had a clear shot to kill this adoptive mother, and she actually snuck up on them, and they were at her mercy. And in the moment when she could have taken their lives, she actually just scared the heck out of them and let them live. And it sort of it made me realize, we have a choice. We have choices in how we interact with the natural world. We have we may be different species. We may have um, different ways of living, but being different doesn't make it any less valid. Um, of course, I had zoo books, that I loved ordering from Scholastic, and I was constantly at the veterinarian, with our own family cats, um, and so those were formative experiences, I think. I think even The Lion King, when that movie came out, I think that probably influenced me too. I was just in awe, when The Circle of Life played at the beginning, and I thought it is a circle of life. We are in a circle of life, So um, those are a few of them, and then it just spun out as it does, and I became sort of obsessed with observing animals and curious about what they see and how they take the world in their own unique way. And it's been a wonderful ride.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because it doesn't have to be that one defining moment. It can be a series of influences throughout your life. And again, like, yeah, same with me, like Marty Stauffer on PBS. I loved watching those nature shows, and growing up with Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin on Animal Planet. And then having that same kind of environment in your home where your parents you will allow a number of animals. I had newts and frogs and all kind of things, and rabbits, um, and then having that mold you into a particular set of world views, and something that I know, we all have kids, and we hope that they can at least get those same kind of experiences and compassion, where I think a lot of compassion. I think the majority of people have that compassion for animals, both domesticated and wild, and then somewhere along the way, that either is beaten out of them or is just kind of set aside. And so, having a voice like yours to speak outside of our echo chamber is really important, for those animals to be recognized. And so, with that voice, could you tell me the difference between voice as first gentleman, and then when Governor Polis was a congressman? How did you have the same kind of platform when he was serving in Congress as you do now, or explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, no, I'm excited that you're interested in this, Mark, because it is sort of fascinating. So, um, when Jared was elected to Congress in 2008, I had never been to Washington, D.C., if you can believe it. But my family was spread between New York City and Colorado, and then of course the members who had retired in Florida. Um, so uh, when I arrived in Washington, and this was, as I said, early 2009, it was actually quite uh, undeveloped in a number of ways, or ill-suited to new types of people coming on behalf of government or to represent different groups.
Are you
Uh,
saying not old white men?
yes, and in fact, one of my first experiences that still gives me a chuckle to this day was they had a congressional spouse training. That's what my title was, by the way, is a congressional spouse. There were 435 of us in the House of Representatives, and then another 100 in the Senate. And so, as you can imagine, a much lower profile. But up until that point, the vast majority of senators and members of Congress had been men. And so they had come to DC if they were married with wives. And so when I came to DC, not only was I unusual because I was a same sex partner, but I went along with Betsy Markey's husband, Jim, and we were in the training, and they gave us gift bags. And inside the gift bags, they had uh, red lip gloss and a necklace and a bracelet, and the instructions they gave us in preparation for President Obama's first inauguration was that it would be cold, so pack an extra shawl. So I
Wow.
you I know this is
You
really
were fully
funny.
prepared with that gift bag, huh?
I
Does
was
the lip
fully
gloss
prepared.
keep your lips from chapping? I'm not sure.
I actually I had a good laugh with Jim over that because uh even though he was there as Betsy's husband, and then I was there as at the time Jared's partner because marriage equality had not yet passed. And but we were both thinking the same thing, which is this is not tailored to us. This is, I guess we're new. We're a new kind of spouse, and so just to get back to your question, there were 5 initiatives that you could sign up for as a congressional spouse, and most of them related to children, human children. So either childhood hunger or food insecurity or access to education. Um, the closest that I got to advocating for animals, which of course was something I wanted to do, was I kind of piggybacked on Michelle Obama's healthy eating initiative. And if you guys remember, she highlighted a garden that she grew fresh vegetables in, and um, and so that sort of allowed me an in to talk about incorporating more vegetables into your diet. It wasn't necessarily, I didn't have the intention of, promoting a plant-based diet, but it was a way to talk about animals and factory farming. Um, so that ended up being what I did. I any opportunity I had, and then I befriended a few other spouses who were interested in animal issues. Specifically, Elizabeth Kucinich was my best bud. And we used to get together and talk about animals all the time. And we attended hearings, put on by Physicians for Responsible Medicine about animal testing and military simulators that military field doctors could use instead of testing on live animal subjects. So I got it in where I could. It was nothing compared to being first gentleman.
Yeah, it's really, I was not expecting Michelle Obama's vegetable garden to be your gateway to animal welfare initiatives, but you managed to make it work. And
You
the same
gotta
thing with,
strike while the iron's hot, right?
I know, and the defense, the defense issue too. I think these are great ways. I always say if there's not a door, there's a window. If there's not a window, there's a crack somewhere. We can open a little further and get
It's
in.
so
So
true.
that is
You
so
look for what's available.
exactly. And then that gives you experience that you could then leverage in your later platform. So that was a lot different than your role as first gentleman. How excited were you to not have to use a vegetable garden to talk about animals?
I love the way you put the question. So well, it was interesting. So he won in late 2018 and then took office in January 2019. And for the first few months, I would say people were more fascinated by the fact that I actually was Colorado's first ever first gentleman. We'd only ever had first ladies up until that point. And so I was again in this sort of strange position of being the first of something. And so that was what everyone wanted to focus on when they interviewed me. And uh, you know, what was I going to do with the governor's mansion? Do I like to decorate?
Oh man.
Do I? Yeah, I know.
All the hard-hitting questions.
The, what's your favorite recipe to share? And I said, well, I'm not that great in the kitchen, actually. I'm not much of a hand, but um, at a certain point, I think it was right ahead of the Claw Caucus. Roland Halpern had reached out to me and invited me to come speak at the Claw Caucus because he had heard that I was interested in animal issues. And so simultaneously, Sean Boyd from, I think it's Channel 9 News, interviewed me about whether or not I would use my platform to advocate and what I would be doing. And so I said, at the time, I said, I want to work on animal welfare. I said, I want to do this for all animals, because I was aware of factory farms. And, you know, she very kindly said he picked a nonpartisan issue. And
Awesome.
Wow, I did not know that.
yeah,
Well,
you guys should look up the interview. I think you'll be shocked both at how cheerful everyone seemed, knowing how controversial these issues can become. And you'll probably also think I look like a 12-year-old. This role has aged me.
oh, I mean, I used to be a brunette, so here we are. No, I did you know when you chose animal welfare that in Colorado and in most states, wildlife aren't considered even animals, that they're considered a resource.
I had no idea.
And how did you learn about how the state manages wild animals, and how did that start to integrate into your animal welfare platform?
It's a great question. So, my first step after declaring that I would use my platform and that I would advocate for a cause was to bring together a group of advisors who could sort of catch me up on the current state of affairs of animal issues in Colorado. And I, perhaps not so cleverly, named it the PAW Committee, People for Animal Welfare. And I filled it with people who were recommended to me. They were primarily um, people who worked in animal shelters and worked on companion animal issues. So pets, not wildlife, and not farm animals. And then I shared my information, probably rather foolishly. I gave my number out freely. I gave my personal email. I was inundated quite quickly by people who told me that there had never been anyone in a government position who would openly talk about animal issues with them and actually take them seriously. And one of the first requests that I had gotten, there were two of them actually. One of them you guys will find even more interesting, but the first one came from a really lovely lady whose name escapes me right now, who had lived in another state and had adopted a raccoon. And the raccoon had been orphaned, and whichever state she was in, I want to say it might have been Tennessee. You were allowed to actually have a raccoon as a pet, and uh, she. So she then proceeded to tell me, but what I really want to do is move to this beautiful property that I own in Colorado. But I can't move to Colorado and bring my raccoon with me because if I do, CPW will take the raccoon and kill it. And I said, that is impossible. How could that possibly be the state's policy? You know, I said, you've had the raccoons and since the time he was a baby, and it was so visceral because she literally couldn't live in the state she wanted to live in because she didn't trust that our wildlife agency wouldn't come and take her pet away. Um, that was sort of an entry point for me for, the crossover between companion animals and wildlife. And of course, my thinking has evolved to sort of encompass both realities that uh, wildlife should be wild and remain wild and not be adopted as pets, but sometimes you also end up with situations like Pat Craig, who runs the Wild Animal Sanctuary, and you know many of them probably were pets before they were rescues. Um, so the second one was actually Dr. Christine Capaldo in Telluride reached out almost immediately and told me about what was happening to bobcats and the inherent cruelty of how they were being trapped and dispatched. And I come from an English background, so of course my first thought was dispatched.
Where are
What
they
do you?
going?
I know. What are
No,
they?
they're in little police cars. It's like
That's what
Bobcat one,
exactly.
Bobcat one coming in,
I. That's what I thought. I thought of yellow cab.
right?
I'm like, oh, the dispatcher, or the police or something. So um I got in touch with her, and it's sort of been that way. I told everyone over the last 7 years, whatever the animal issue is, whatever the species, from the tiniest invertebrate or insect all the way up to our charismatic megafauna, as they call them, I want to help. And I am open to being educated and using my platform in any way that I can to to help animals and keep the focus on helping animals. And I think we've accomplished quite a bit um, over the last 7 years, but a lot of it, you happen upon systemic problems by accident. You're not looking for them. You just one day find out that there's no law that requires you to remove a carcass from your property,
Y-
and
y-
say that's a
yeah.
problem.
I, I know Mark has questions, and I'm sorry, Mark, that I am stealing so many questions. I did want to clarify too, for those that don't know what dispatch means, it's how folks kill the bobcat. So a fur trapper will kill a bobcat. There's certain regulations on how you should kill your trapped bobcat. In Colorado, we don't allow for lethal traps, so bobcats are held in cage traps for up to 2 days. You just have to check the traps every day, and then you're supposed to shoot the bobcat in the head with a gun that doesn't damage the coat. Although there's all sorts of horrific ways that people are killing bobcats to preserve the coat. And then in Colorado, it's perfectly legal to sell that bobcat's coat for profit. So you can get a trapping license. With that license, you can trap and kill as many bobcats as you want. And Mark, I believe it's $35, right? For around there for a trapping license.
Yeah, $35 or 35 for a small game plus 10 for a fur bearer license,
So for
whatever
the
a fur bearer is.
Yeah, for the low price of $35 to $45, you can kill as many bobcats or beavers or minks or martens as you want, and then you can sell their fur in Colorado. And so when you talk about systemic issues, that's a prime one that Dr. Capaldo brought to you, and she's a veterinarian in the West Slope, in that we have an agency, CPW, that's saying you can do this for next to nothing and totally just kill these animals for their fur to sell, as many as you'd like for this price. And we also have a CITES tag that goes on those bobcats, so they can be sold in interstate trade and also exported beyond. So then you also have national and international policies at play for sales of that fur. So there's so many different levels there, and I that's just one species. So I imagine as you started to peel back those layers, you were very surprised, as I was, and as I know Mark was too, as we start looking at each layer of wildlife policy.
Absolutely, 100%. And Sam, it's so interesting that you brought up the price, and Mark, that you quoted, the that is the dollar value that we attach to the life of these animals. And um, back when I lived in DC, and uh, happily, I will say, got to spend a lot of time around then Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is a master legislator, a master vote counter. And she used to say, I heard her say frequently, that our national budget is a statement of our values. And that's something that I took with me to Colorado. Um, and whenever I find myself in conversation about what it costs to take different species and be able to then go into the market and sell, something that you've harvested. Um, that thought process gets underway where I think that really that's that's what the life of a bobcat is worth. $35, so you think about all of the things that, for people add value to our lives, the stories about where we were born and who we were born to and who our friends were and how many times we moved, and the experience of living, all the things you've seen and the places you've been. And I I try to keep that in mind when I think about wildlife too. That it's never just a black bear that who we're looking at. You know, it. She's been places. She's survived things, and somehow, all of that amounts to, what is it, $250. It might have gone up. Hopefully, it went up, but um, I'm just, then I think to myself, I'm glad I can go out for a walk with Gia and not have people firing at me.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? I like to appreciate that as well. And because Marlon has been hanging around our wildlife agency staff so much, he's developed some sort of code where he says words like dispatch and harvest. And so I'll define harvest as killing, right? That's what you were referring to. And
Euphemisms, right?
yes, yes. Making sure we soften everything so no one actually knows what we're talking about. Uh, so with value, the value of an animal, we are in a very interesting place since voters approved wolves to come to Colorado in 2020, and we have had 2 rounds of introductions where we've brought a total of 25 wolves to the state. There's a lot of value, as in dollar amounts, uh, with wolves that are getting in conflict with sheep, cows, and that's so we're talking things are getting mucky, right? We have value, monetary value with that person's living, but then the wolf is assigned currently no value monetarily for being alive, and so the wolf ends up uh, typically getting the bad end of that bargain. What's your views on what you like to see happen in Colorado with circumstances like wolves and ranchers, and how you hope that this resolves itself?
Yeah, well, so as you said, this is a complex i- issue with a lot of feelings, as they say, attached to it. Um, I'm always careful, not to discount, the lived experience or the life experiences of people you know, people I know and people I don't know. Um, just in the same way as I wonder about where animals have been and what they've seen and what they've had to endure. Um, it would be nice, I think, if, um, as they say, when laws are passed, there's the letter of the law and then there's the spirit of the law. I don't believe that when Coloradans voted to bring wolves back, that they were thinking dollars and cents, or that they were attaching specific values, or even opposed to the idea that compensation would need to be paid out, or that they would be learning about generations of selective breeding of livestock to that makes one cow worth more than the $15,000 that you can claim if you have wolf predation. Um, I think I think the idea was actually much nobler than that. I think that Coloradans wanted to right a wrong. They knew that we had driven out a native carnivore, and that we had, among many other types of animals that we've driven away, We've created gaps across all of our ecosystems. And so the idea now that we're not in quite so desperate a situation as perhaps we were back in 1940, where we didn't have ways to subsist as easily. There weren't supermarkets, Um, but now we have choices. We have things that we can do to right those wrongs. Um, it would be nice, I think, to acknowledge the spirit of the law, why people voted for it, and I think it would be nice also for us to have some more reasonable expectation setting that wolves are actually carnivores and wolves are going to be wolves. And if we want to restore species who we've driven out, then we need to allow them to do what they do naturally and not punish them for being themselves. Um, and so that puts a burden of responsibility on us, to work with the systems that we have in place, but also to ask for help and accept help when we need it, in order to protect our lives or our livelihoods, however you want to put it. And so I have to admit that I am very confused about everything
Me
really
too.
involving this
Good.
program. I have to say that I've never seen, you know, we have talked this to death. We had an incredible stakeholding process that included so many different people from all walks of life, and you know, whether it was animal advocates, hunters, trappers, ranchers, farmers, all sitting at a table for 18 months, discussing what should go into this plan. And then, coming to consensus about what the plan would be, releasing the plan, getting our Parks and Wildlife Commission to actually approve the plan, and then 1 month before, try to sabotage the plan and stop the wolves from coming. So I feel like we've got a lot of bad faith negotiators or people who are not telling us, who are misportraying their willingness to play together in the sandbox and to play nice. So we're in this situation now where I think we presumed that we'd be dealing with people who would respect everything we've done. Um, and this is on both sides, of course. Not every you don't lay blame solely at the feet of one person or one group, but um, we did talk about all of this and we did create programs, and we are continually adding more money to the pot, and making it available to make this work. So we need some collaboration here, instead of constantly fighting to stop it.
Right. And I'm I am shocked at how many different ways there are to try to fight to stop it after it's already been voted on, rather than working within it. It seems like there's a lot of denial going on still. One of the recent situations that happened here in Colorado, I'd like to describe that a bit, and then I'd love your thoughts on it. We had an uncollared wolf in Rio Blanco County, and that wolf had killed 3 sheep, although they say 6 depredations. So when any agency in any state says depredation, they mean a wild animal preying on a livestock animal, generally, or sometimes a domesticated dog or cat. Um, and that can result in injuries or death. So it doesn't always mean that the wolf or coyote even killed the animal. It could be, oh, it bit it, or sometimes even it just scared it, right? In each state, it's a little different. And with each conflict specialist, even within states, it can be different. So there's a lot of nuances there. So in Rio Blanco County, we had a wolf that was said to be the cause of 6 depredations, which I say predations because that's what wolves naturally do. 3 of those resulted in death, 1 ewe and 2 lambs. The other piece in play here is that these sheep, so there were 3 sheep total that died by 1 endangered wolf that didn't have a collar, so it's presumed he naturally migrated here. Um, these sheep were turned out on public lands. So, for folks that don't know, it is perfectly legal to release your domesticated sheep with a permit, which costs you about $1.35 per cow calf pair. I think the same would probably be the same for a lamb sheep pair per month, and you just let them go on public lands. So Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management lands, you take your trailer out, you drop them off, you pick them up 3 months later, you count how many you have, and then whatever you lost, those are your losses for that season. That's kind of how it's worked over time. Some folks are better at their business model than others and will stay with their animals. I don't think any of us listening would say, hey, I'm going to go drop my dog off in the national forest and come back in 3 months. And if he's not there, it's the forest's fault, or the wolf's fault, or the bear's fault. But this is how the business model works. That's what you do. There's a cost to that. And as native carnivores are restored, because we need them for all sorts of reasons beyond just a financial value, there's a cost of doing business in that way. So CPW and the state very generously will give you money if you lose an animal to a wolf. So we will, if you lose 3 sheep, we will pay you more than the market value of those sheep, and we'll even pay you for the other 3 sheep that were injured, and we'll pay you for the other 80 sheep out there because they were afraid and they had a lower weight at the end of the season, which is something totally different in Colorado. We cover indirect losses. So in this scenario, we've got Rio Blanco County. We've got a sheep grower running a business on public lands. We've got an endangered wolf that's killed 3 sheep. We have a state that's willing to fairly compensate above and beyond market value and cover indirect losses for this producer. And yet, we still went and killed a wolf for this producer, or at least shot it. We're not sure where it is. Why? Is this still happening? I don't know if you have the why, but I just want to lay out that picture for our listeners because this is how it happens. And this kind of gives the industry a bad name. And then everyone's like, what's going on with the state? And then people are unhappy on both sides. And I'd love your take on that because that's another example again of those systems that are so broken.
And that why goes back to that values piece.
Yeah.
Exactly. What matters to you, and how to use, I guess, industry parlance. How do you make someone whole? How do you make a producer whole after they've lost, had a loss? Sam, you mentioned something that I just this bothers me to no end, and I think part of it is just the absolute unpredictability that you referenced of turning out all of your cows or all of your sheep into the wilderness, and then 3 months later, seeing how many are left, and then sort of just assuming and being able to claim that the ones who didn't come back were taken out by native predators, um, or wolves, when in fact it could have been a lightning bolt, it could have been a poison plant that they ate.
Birthing complications are more common.
Cattle
It could be
rustling.
Cattle
cattle.
rustling, huge issue, right, in our state. Um, we've tried we've overly, I would say, this is my opinion, but we have um, we have been overly generous in uh, in a particular piece of this compensation plan, which is the indirect losses. The um, I think it was at one of the more recent Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meetings, and one of the commissioners actually said, "Okay, so you've lost." I forget the exact number, maybe like 6 cows, or maybe it was just one cow. And then there were 42 calves who didn't show up, who had also been turned out into the wilderness. And so each of those calves was claimed as an indirect loss for the one confirmed wolf predation of the one cow. And so we've created a system that's easy to abuse, because it doesn't require, rigorous documentation. And even the industry itself, is not that rigorous insofar as these all of these other factors that we just mentioned that could contribute to your losses. You know, I remember last year, do you guys remember that there was a story, a tragic story about um, a lightning bolt that killed a rancher and 30 of his cows? And so you ask yourself, okay, how do we inject a little perspective into things without making light of tragedy? But um, you know, my view of this is that, uh, and I will just refer back. I have a almost 14-year-old and an almost 12-year-old, and it never ceases to amaze me how clever they are in getting what they want. If they can't get it from me, then they'll go to Jared and they'll get it from him. If they can't get it from either of us, they'll go to their grandparents. Um, and the lesson that they take from this is um, that bad behavior gets rewarded. And so what I've seen over the last 3 years is CPW maybe wishfully thinking that, by compensating, right, that by compensating these losses at a very high dollar value, and by creating 7 programs, and by allowing volunteers who want to serve on the commission to go before the Senate Ag Committee and be personally attacked by the committee chair. Um, they hoped that by doing all of that, that would buy us some goodwill and maybe some more cooperation. But I think what they're finding is the more you give, the more gets taken. And I'm worried that we're now in a cycle where the news has sort of covered losses and covered what they would characterize as bad behavior by wolves, when in reality wolves are being wolves, and producers do have a responsibility, and some are most definitely doing everything that they can to deter predation. But then there are others who are not, and they're getting rewarded as well for bad behavior. And so, what message does that send? We were supposed to do this better than all of the other Northern Rockies states. I think that
Right.
was our goal, right? We're going to set a new standard.
We're just blending in with Wyoming here. I just had a couple quick questions, and maybe we can rapid fire them. And then, Mark, you can ask a closing some closing questions after that. Does that work? Are we
Yep.
ready for a rapid fire round?
The lightning round.
This is the
Oh my
lightning
gosh.
round.
All
Okay.
right.
I'll make it
I'm going to turn on my brain.
you and Mark can both answer, okay? We'll make it so we'll see who gets it first. How much does it cost a producer to get a range rider in the state?
0.
Mark was right. He was fast.
Ding, ding,
Mark,
ding.
you're fast.
So you can have
You're
a free
on the
range
ball.
rider. How much does it cost for a producer to get a livestock carcass pit dug for them in the state to put away their carcasses?
0.
0 is also correct. Yes, CPW offered that to the last producer who had a lot of losses, offered to dig the pit for him for free.
And
Last
the
question.
Department of Agriculture.
And the Department of Agriculture. And then my last question really is, with these producers, they seem very upset at how the cows and sheep are dying. These are animals that are going to be slaughtered for meat, correct?
That is
Yes.
correct.
And then I imagine, Marlon, since you're such an advocate too in the factory farming and farm animal space, you're surely seeing these producers show up and advocate for slaughterhouse reforms and reforms that would actually get their animals treated more humanely then too, right? They're certainly doing this across the board, or is this just wolf specific?
I'll tell you, this is fascinating to me. So when we go to committee hearings or commission meetings and we hear about these losses and we hear this rhetoric, well, we love the animals we're raising. Okay, so I will not call that into question. I'm sure that for the period of time that this animal is in your custody and you are raising that animal, that you are out there making sure that they have enough to eat, that they're comfortable, that mothers and calves are together. But you're offering one snapshot of a process uh, that will result in this cow being turned into a hamburger or a steak. And um, and food, of course, as we know, is political. And so I'm sure that there's an ability to compartmentalize your part, the part you play in the process. And I think that's what we sort of see is, okay, I care for, from day 1 to day 100. But on day 101, it's not my problem anymore. They're on the truck, they're headed to, the meat packer. Um, and so, you do sort of have to ask yourself, well, there's some cognitive dissonance here, right? We care enough to make money. We care enough to look after our livelihoods, but um, but in the end, who the consumer is, it matters to us. Um, it's wrong for a wolf to eat a cow, but it's not wrong for a person to eat a cow. And I think we can all agree that it's a lot easier for us to get food than it is for wild animals who have to hunt. They have to hunt their food down. They don't get to go to King Supers. And so um there's that element of it, and then there's the part where they just are not very successful a lot of the time. And I go back to punishing animals for being animals. They're doing what comes naturally to them, and yet there seems to be this notion out there that we are going to get to a point where the wolves in Colorado will never touch another cow or another sheep. And I think it's really it's a disservice to the public to suggest that predators are not going to predate. They are going to do that. And that's okay. It's okay because we love our state. We love, our ecosystems to be whole. We love going places. But as someone at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wisely told me recently, we were talking about wolverines. We're hoping to reintroduce wolverines in Colorado. And they said, so when the Trump administration came in, it's no longer about the animals at U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It's about the people. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, if you can find the angle where the benefit is to the person and the indirect benefit is to the animal. And they said, so for example, if you want to help wolverines, then protect the trail where people like to hike and wolverines are known to live. You protect the trail, you protect the animal. I said, this is really a backwards way of thinking. We're putting the human interest first, and then thinking about the value of the animal afterwards. Um, so I don't know. That was one of my famous tangents. I'm almost thinking I did not answer any of your questions, but I hope I answered one.
No, you did. You did. And until we have a first wolf or first elk or whatever it may be, we're going to have to rely on you and people like you to you provide this point of view that the animals have.
You
And
made my day. A first wolf or a first elk. That would be the best ever. I would love that.
and me too. Me too. And since we're talking about potential future inhabitants of the governor's mansion in Colorado, I'd like to get a couple of different answers here. Like, one is, what do you hope to get done in this last year and change that you and Governor Polis have? And then, uh, what are your concerns, or do you have any optimism for what happens after that?
Sure. Yes. Well, I can legitimately say that I had hoped by this point that we would have gotten a lot more done than we've gotten done. I'm naturally a bit of an optimist because I like to think, all people love animals, or at least you would hope, what's not to love, right? Um, so over the next year and a half, I think it's now actually a year and a half, or maybe 16 months, 15 months. So we have prioritized the getting the wolf reintroduction to a point where the the biology is going well. That actually ironically is sort of simple. The wolves are doing what they do. The social science piece of this, the part where we talked for 5 years and supposedly agreed, and yet we're still getting petitions through the CPW Commission to pause wolves. We have bills that, boy, a few years ago, a bill that would have delayed wolf reintroduction till 2029. And then just a few weeks ago, a bill to pause the program for a year until we have a new governor who presumably would not care about the wolf program and happily, grant producers the end of the program. We've got to get the wolf program right. And so that means getting the social piece right. And so that's a priority. and that involves new messaging, and it involves new messengers, I think. People who can go into the communities, who can speak with a trusted voice, who don't feel betrayed. It also means a uh, better media coverage, and also, frankly, some excitement. We haven't seen excitement around the fact that we are the first state to vote to bring back an endangered species, which is incredibly exciting, and we were quite lucky the very first season to have a wolf pack form, a family, and we're not celebrating the Copper Creek pack. Instead, we're always talking about what's wrong. So, so that's a key piece. Another priority that we really want to get done, and I think you guys will appreciate this, is fur bearers. So, um, there's nothing less scientific, right, than unlimited take. And that's another word that I bet you guys love, right? Take, killing, unlimited killing of a species. And I've talked in the office about this. I've talked with CPW officials and really anyone who'd listen and just say, if you have an unlimited bag limit, doesn't that presume you have an infinite number of animals that you can kill? Um, Set any number. Just set a number so that we don't assume that there's an infinite number of animals available to kill. Um, so there's that angle. There's also the commercial angle that you guys did a fantastic job detailing, and you don't need me to, reiterate in a less eloquent way. Um, but then there's also the question of, what is permissible in terms of hunting and trapping, and I think there's some really cruel outdated methods that are still allowed and are still lawful. And I think they deserve to be looked at and reviewed and possibly outlawed, for purposes of stating Colorado values. We don't stand for cruelty. We, don't stand for unlimited taking from nature. We take what we need. We don't take everything. Um, I'd also love to see human bear conflict addressed. It's so simple. It's an issue of securing trash, and not leaving junk around. Um,
And not
Yeah,
leaving
I
your
was
picnic
impressed.
baskets around either.
No picnic baskets. I was really impressed with the grants the state offers for bear conflict and seeing how much money we give out to promote, bear safe communities through different trash ordinances or different ways that people mitigate waste.
Absolutely. And that unbelievably, that came out of Steamboat Springs. A few years back, I got a call from I think he might have been the regional manager there from CPW. And he said, we want to enable all homes and all businesses in Steamboat Springs to have bear-proof trash cans. And from that, the grant program evolved and developed, and so it's continuing. It's been wonderful to be able to see, each community tailor its response to conflict, um, and to also see awareness around why animals behave the way they do at different times of the year. Right? I mean, how often do we? Every story that I've seen in the news about carnivores, about predators, are conflict stories. You never hear you never hear, oh, we saw a beautiful mountain lion, standing at the top of a mountain. Instead, you hear the mountain lion scratched the back of my head while I was soaking in my hot tub, you know? And I
I
always,
missed that story. Yeah, the hot tub that was an in-ground hot tub, and their head was ground level. And the positive on that was that person didn't die. That person got an inquisitive mountain lion saying, "What is this?" And pawed. And they could have
a
easily
wildlife
ended
encounter.
poorly, but the mountain lion chose not to do the bad thing.
Exactly, right? And um, you know, that understanding that, at certain times of the year, you will have uh mothers who have new cubs, or kittens with them, and they'll be a little extra defensive. And it's good to give them their space. Um, and uh, just that understanding, I think, before bears go into torpor, or, you know, uh, I know we think of it as hibernation, but, they load up on calories. That's a good time to take down your bird feeders. It's a good time to make extra sure that your trash is secure. Um, so we're trying to do all of these things, with programs to help people and help communities. Now, to the other question that you asked, Mark, which I think is really important. Um, Politically, I think we always see these cycles where the pendulum swings the other way. So whatever you've had, the next person to come in sort of does it the opposite. Because politically, it benefits you to distinguish yourself, and to not just be more of the same. That you want to be remembered for signature achievements. And so, we'll have had 8 years of an executive branch, or at least a governor's office, and a governor who cared about wildlife and cared about animal issues. Um, and some legislators who've been champions and have led on these issues. But I don't think we can take it for granted anymore. I think that when we're deciding who to vote for, and we're going to town halls and we're asking candidates to fill out questionnaires, I think it's okay now to say, do you care about any particular animal issue? It doesn't need to be something specific even. It could be, do you support shelter dogs? Are you for adopt, don't shop? You know, or, do you oppose fur trapping? The way it's done right now, or um do you oppose factory farming? But I think candidates should just be prepared for a more environmentally and welfare conscious electorate. And they should be prepared to answer those questions. And I think as voters, we should ask those questions. And if the response, I mean, people know, right? If you don't have an answer, it's pretty obvious pretty quickly that you've given no thought and that you probably don't care. And that should signal to voters, okay, maybe I'm going to ask the other candidate and see if I get a better answer. Things that matter to you. Um, and then the other piece I was going to say is early engagement, which you guys do so wonderfully. Um, the livestock associations and the hunting associations are really good at this. They engage early. They sort of stay on message. They ask for the same things. They don't have a lot of variation. And we, as advocates for animals, need to do the same thing. So right now, my advice would be, if you're a Republican, go to the Republican candidates for governor and say, what do you what tell me something about animals. Tell me a position you have. If you're a Democrat, you could go to Michael Bennett or Phil Weiser or, you know, any of the candidates who are to come perhaps as well, and ask them the same question and see what response you get. Because if you guys remember, Hillary Clinton a few years ago actually had an animal welfare platform, and it
Yeah,
was quite amazing at the time. A
yeah,
whole
absolutely.
platform.
And there are millions of other Colorado residents beyond the ones that can vote, and they deserve to have some questions presented to candidates as much as anyone else does. My last question, you've given us a generous amount of time here today, and I know that what you've outlined for the next year is extensive. Have you given any thought to how you'll stay engaged with animal advocacy after your term as first gentleman finishes?
It's coming, isn't it? I'm going to be retired, uh,
You'll just be another one
against
of
my
us.
will. No. um, I did actually. A rancher did tell me that they were going to come to the governor's mansion and evict me with a glitter-covered cowboy boot.
Well,
So,
that's nice.
isn't that
Do
nice?
you get to keep the boot?
Is he
I
making
would
the glittered
demand
boot
that I get
himself?
to keep the boot.
It'll go
That
great with the
boot's mine.
lipstick, the lip gloss, and the shawl too.
I know, right? So, my there's a lot that I've learned over the last 8 years, but there's a lot that I have not been able to share publicly, and with advocates, and a lot of it is because there are internal processes that are not yet finalized. There are ideas that are kind of being spitballed, and um, I think people would be surprised to find out all of the various back channels that exist that different interest groups use to get their agenda done. Um, I like to think that I have created some avenues for animal advocates into the executive branch. And we've been able to hire on and set up resources that didn't exist before. So, for example, one of my proudest achievements, and it's a shared achievement, is at the Colorado Department of Agriculture.
The Division of Animal Welfare.
Yes, the Division of
I know,
Animal Welfare.
I wanted to talk about that today, but we have run so long. But go ahead and share a little bit about that.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part two.
Yeah.
Um, the Division of Animal Welfare actually developed out of a very weird and very disturbing situation in Weld County a few years ago, where um, there was a resident who owned uh, sort of a menagerie of farm animals, and was not taking care of them, was not feeding them species appropriate food, and wasn't providing shelter. And this is really bad when you think about the specifics. So we're talking about sheep being fed bird seed, and the shelter, um, when it was 10 degrees below zero, was a metal shed with three walls and missing a fourth wall. And our standard was that you have to provide water. Um, but there's nothing that says that the water needs to be in a liquid form. So the water that was out for these animals was an ice cube.
Oh my God.
And so there were a lot of animals who perished, and the owner didn't even bother to clean them up. And in Weld County, um, it's an agricultural county. Um, so there's a little bit less concern, or a little bit less, not less concern, less interest, I would say, in prosecuting cases like this. And so it was through that particular case that we started to try to improve the Bureau of Animal Protection, which is the only entity that can protect farm animals in the state. And over the last few years, we've sort of been just amping it up, and we combined it, and we have a wonderful commissioner of agriculture, our first woman commissioner of agriculture, Kate Greenberg, who cares about animal welfare. And, we work together with her to combine our pet animal care and facilities program with our Bureau of Animal Protection and unite them under the umbrella of the Division of Animal Welfare. And so it now exists as an official division, and it has the opportunity to be a home for future programs that will look after domestic animals. So, pets and livestock, as you'd say, and we've got CPW that handles wildlife. But that's something that didn't exist. There was a phone number for the Bureau of Animal Protection, but there was one person who staffed that phone for 30 years. And I know, 30 years. It was founded in 1990, I think. And we've built it up, and now there are probably 6 or 7 staffers who do full-time investigations and respond to reports of cruelty or neglect. And they give out grants for domestic horses and domestic horse welfare. And now Department of Ag also has a program that helps wild horses and tries to prevent these helicopter roundups, and so staying engaged is really important. Knowing what the resources are, asking the questions. So one thing that I'm going to do the minute I'm out of office, I'm not in office. I have to remember that. I'm constantly reminded I'm a volunteer who happens to be married to the governor. But the first thing that I want to do is and I'm working on this already, is just putting a comprehensive list of everything that we've done and everything that we've set up and all the avenues that we've created to give to advocates so that they know who to call and where to go and how to get help. And we need to continue building on it because we're not there yet. There's a lot of things we didn't get done that I really wish we had. And we still have a year, we'll see. But you guys know these issues are contentious.
They are, but we are so thankful for all of that work you've done, both with like the Division of Animal Welfare for our domesticated animals, our livestock, our wildlife. We couldn't ask for a bigger and better champion than yourself. We are so happy to call you a friend of the pod now, along with being a friend in life, and we appreciate your time that you spent with us and for our listeners today.
Oh, thank you, Mark, so much, and Sam. I feel exactly the same way about you guys. You're my heroes.
Oh, thank you.
Inspire me to want to continue to engage in this work. It's
you
teamwork.
Will. You're stuck now. You're in for life. So thanks for joining us, Marlon.
Well, you guys know how to reach me. So, as I like to say, take advantage of me while I'm still around.
This has been an episode of The Wildlife Wire with me, Mark Searles, and my co-host, Samantha Miller. Thank you for listening.